Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So we're not having any students on this one. We're actually recording this on a Sunday afternoon. I guess it's Sunday evening over in London, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking with Bethany Lyons, who, I mean, you're a seasoned data professional at this point. So you've actually worked for Tableau.
That's a nice way of saying I'm old. I'll take it.
Well, I mean, so how long have you been working in data for?
Since 2013. So yeah, about 11 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I started out at Tableau. Tableau was my first job out of university.
Gotcha.
I joined it before anyone knew it was going to be a thing.
So you've only been working in data 3 years longer than me. So we're both quite seasoned professionals at this point, I'd say.
Old, yeah.
Well, but I actually had a sales career before this, though. So I think I might be older than you at this point.
1988.
Okay, I'm 89, so you got 1 year on me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just why don't you intro yourself? Kind of give us like the origin story, your narrative arc of what have you been up to within the analytics space?
Sure, I guess. So I was born on. No, I'm kidding.
It was a cold winter day.
Pardon me?
I said it was a cold winter day. No, I'm just kidding.
My background originally was I studied pure math in college, and then realized I needed to do something that could get me a job, and that is not pure math. So then I did a master's in operational research, and that was actually how I landed my job at Tableau. Was because the same, like one of the alumni of my program was the very first consultant at Tableau in Europe. And so he came recruiting in our pool of grads. And that's when I realized like the value of the network that you get with such a degree is like amazing. It's like the alumni network is super powerful. So yeah, he came recruiting and was telling me about this thing called Tableau. And I was like, visualization software sounds great. Like I'd spent all of my summer just building graphs in Excel. So I felt like the product really resonated with me like right out the gates. And then I started out in like pre-sales at Tableau. So that would be like helping customers do technical evaluations of the product and make sure it fits their needs. Then I did like some partnership stuff. So I built out a lot of our partner network in Europe, which is pretty cool because like those companies are still going strong today. And then I moved on to like working with our largest enterprise accounts, and then moved into product management. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tableau, but like I worked on stuff like LOD calculations and relationships.
Those are tricky. That's tricky to explain. Level of detail.
Level of detail calcs. Yeah. There's a blog out in the ether, like top 15 LOD expressions. It has like millions of views. I wrote that in like 2015.
Ooh, wow. Yeah. So I was the Tableau local user group leader for like a few years.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm amazed we haven't met before this.
You what?
I'm amazed we haven't met before this at a conference or something.
Well, so I have been pretty local to North Carolina. I met Christopher Scott, who runs the Raleigh Tug. Do you know him?
No.
It's funny because he actually just sent me a message. He wants me to talk about my experience in the job market this year.
Oh, cool.
It is bad right now. Like, you know, I mean, I shut down my career services training program because like our placement rate dropped below 90%. And I was like, I feel bad taking money. I feel unethical, or ethically gray at least, taking money from people who don't have a job. So I was like, I'm just going to get out of that space.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one thing that I'm teaching my students in the classroom, and I don't even think they realize we're doing this, is like search engine optimization for their profile. So my students are actively getting recruited once they get their first job.
Yeah.
Or actually, I mean, I had one that was like, oh yeah, I got extremely lucky. A company reached out to me that's local because they found me on LinkedIn. It's like, well, I mean, it's not lucky if you kind of build the right mousetrap, because it's like we go into like keyword optimization. They get a project with a consulting company, my company, on there, and it really helps position them, I think, separate from 99% of the grads, because it's Greensboro College, it's tiny, and it's not a prestige brand. It's not Harvard or anything like that. But I was asking somebody this. Are you familiar with Maven Analytics?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was me and John Pollard had like a little catch up meeting earlier this week, and I was asking him, I was like, is there another analytics professor that like has a brand out on LinkedIn? And maybe the data professor, but I think he's like more on the data engineering side. I think he's over in like Southeast Asia. But most professors just kind of live quiet
lives behind the
ivory
screen.
tower. Yeah. So yeah, those networks are very, very powerful though. It sounds like you got plugged into great in your grad school.
Yes, I was very lucky with the network that I got out of grad school. Totally. I'm trying to think. I've got one job in my life through recruiters, and all other jobs have been through like network. And the one job that I got through recruiters did not go well. And the other three were like great.
Yeah. Well, see, that's something that the reason I started my own consulting agency is that I had 2 terrible back-to-back internships when I was fresh out of my MBA program. Actually, no, it was a required internship during the summer of so I worked full-time for 3 months at a company. And in hindsight, I just had really bad managers. Like the way I like to describe the guy, and it's funny because he reached out to me. He might even hear this, and I'm not naming names or anything, but he kind of came off like Patrick Bateman a little bit. Like he was like trying to like corporate play. He made me as uncomfortable in the interview process as possible, and like tried to put me on the spot. And it's like, oh, that's a red flag right there. And then the next guy, English was his second language and he had a stutter. I couldn't understand what he said at all. So we had our first meeting. I caught none of what he was saying. And then I came back and I was like, is this what you want? He's like, this is the level of this level of work is what I would expect from a high schooler where I'm from. Which like, I'm realizing that's the horror story. Like, I don't think I've heard another story that bad from an intern. Like you have lower expectations. And then like, I just didn't have the social, intelligence to navigate that situation. And also too, like I was very much in a scarcity mindset because the MBA program that I went through didn't have as robust of a network. It sounds like yours. So I was like, I felt just lucky to be there to where now, like interviewing this year, I've had 2 companies reach out to me specifically to hire me, but then, I had 3 other cold companies that I applied for. So I had 5 companies that were on the table. So then I'm like much more abundance mindset. And also too, like I feel a little bit weird talking about money and finances, but I think it ties into one of the topics we're going to talk about later is mental health. I can live off my passive revenue streams. So like, I don't even need to work right now. It's more like I'm doing this because I spent a quarter of the year last year on a beach in Mexico and I got super depressed. Like you think like that's a dream, right? Yeah. Like I'm 35. I don't feel like I'm, in my twilight years, like where I just want to like lay around. So I'm like, it was cool for like 7 days or 5 days, but then it's like, I felt like
you feel unproductive.
Yeah. I felt like that movie Groundhog Day where it was just like the same thing over and over and over again. And there was no like, stimulation from the environment. I was like a monkey in the zoo. Like I was just bored out of my mind. But yeah, so now I'm working at the Fresh Market, which is a high-end grocery store that started in Greensboro, and they've got 165 stores now. So it's a pretty big business, but it's also cool because it's like we can talk about bananas and how much they cost. And it's like, okay, but we're doing, 50 million in sales of that, and we're seeing it at scale. So it's really cool.
Hey, I just want to make a comment on one point you made about like prestige of the network and whatever. I don't want to come across like I just had a prestigious network and then it just happened. Like that's something I worked very actively to build. So this week, if I look at my calendar of what I have going on in the evenings, I have like 2 meetings in the evenings, like every night from Monday to Thursday this week. So I'm meeting with 8 different people this week, and for no reason other than they contacted me and were like, let's chat. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Like, let's do it. Why not? And so like building network is something that it's like, I do it like a form of exercise. It's, it's a muscle that you have to build.
Okay. 2 things. First of all, I wasn't implying that it was your network.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to clarify for the listeners.
But 2, I've got a challenge for you.
Yeah.
Why don't you record those episodes? Why don't you record those and start a podcast?
Oh, because maybe, but I think.
Well, because think about what we've done just now. Yeah. Like we had our off air where we got to kind of talk and like name names and be like, this is what I'm seeing in the industry. And then we jump on the podcast and it's like, okay, there's a certain level of like, I don't want to stir up a bunch of drama. I'm not like in the YouTube reactionary space where that's how I get clicks. But I'm sure that there are a lot of things you're learning from these people that
are worth sharing.
Because think about the leverage you get from a podcast. This podcast gets about 1,000 downloads every episode I post.
Right.
And then some of them, I post them on the podcasting, on the platforms there, but then also on YouTube. And then some of the YouTube videos are getting like tens of thousands of views. So like, it's basically just going to add.
There's better ways
to the fire. Yeah. I just had this conversation with one of my former business partners who his whole thing is he's a fractional CEO and his goal is to have 150 coffee chats a year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it is funny because you saw the Google Doc that was labeled the Internet Sensation Playbook. He came to me and was like, I want to do what you're doing with building the brand.
Yeah.
Taking the conversations I'm having and distilling them down. Because now we've got, we're going to jump, but because I was going to end the podcast on AI, but like now I've got AI tools that I've got 210 episodes. Mm-hmm. I can go in and transcribe all of them in AI and then turn them into articles. I can turn them into sound bites. So then it's like, I've got like a whole content mill that is not, because I don't think generative AI is to the point where you can say, make a post for me on LinkedIn. That's
definitely not. I would never put my name to anything written by AI.
Right. But AI is amazing at curating.
Totally.
Because it's
great at reading and like synthesizing. Yeah.
So like it can get me 95% of the way there to where I could write an article in like 5 minutes and I could post. Do you do that at all? This is a question that I was actually talking about with him.
Yeah.
Of like, should we write LinkedIn articles? Does anybody read them?
I don't do it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't. It just it's something I don't do. Like I find that like the stuff that gets the like traction is inversely proportional to length. So like you want to I go for like high volume, like short sound bites, and then like some of them go viral.
Well, okay, but
like, long blogs and like that kind of stuff we're just in an age where people want to consume like really dense content. That's my perspective on it.
Okay, my perspective is that is true, and the opposite is true.
You're sounding like Rory Sutherland now. Go on.
We're getting into dialectics here, which is what I learned from DBT therapy. I think it's like a U-shaped distribution.
Yeah.
So it's like what you could do, like a layer of sophistication could be, and this has been my experience. So like like I had a meetup on Thursday. Like my intern came into town and I just posted on LinkedIn. People showed up I've never met before, but they had listened to me talk for 200 hours, like in their car while they're working out because of the podcast.
Right.
But you can have those long form content where people get to know you. They get to like,
yeah.
I mean, what my opinions now have changed quite a bit when I started this podcast 4 or 5 years ago. I'm a lot, like a lot of my assumptions were wrong. But that being said, like people actually like seeing that evolution, I think. And then they also will be like, yeah, in episode 23, around 30 minutes in, you said this. I think you're right, but you haven't considered this variable, which is crazy to think about.
Amazing.
Right? But that being said, it's like you can have that long form content, but then the short sound bites and snippets, you get them into the funnel and then you nurture that through the long form stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more like a marketing funnel.
It is.
But like, I don't know. I mean, it could be something valuable for you. I don't know. I don't know what
I think it probably is. I think I haven't figured out what I'm marketing yet.
Well, what are the topics you're talking about in these networking? Like,
I know, but like I at the moment, like I have like this deep held conviction that like the most valuable asset you can build is your social capital.
Your network is your network.
And pardon me.
What's the saying? Like, here's the soundbite. Your network is your network. Yeah. I mean, it's a little Gary Vee-esque. It's not really mine.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm like, I need to invest in social capital, but I don't know what I'm going to spend it on. And it's like, when I was a kid, I was like, I know that I need to save money, but I don't know what I'm going to spend it on. So I spent all my teen years like working at Dairy Queen, saving up money. Yeah. And like, just, I was like, I'm somebody who's just like put something in the bank for a rainy day. Like, I don't know. And that ended up paying off. Like I was able to get through university with no debt and so on.
Wow. Good for you. I was about to say,
I don't live in America though, so it's different. Like our fees aren't the same in Canada or in the UK. But yeah, like I have that same mindset as I did when I was a kid. Just now I'm like, no, this bank is social capital, and I haven't figured out what I'm going to spend it on. But I do believe that like the future of entrepreneurship is content creators and people who can build an audience are like the next CEOs. Because and I did work for, like my last job was for an early stage startup, and I was the chief product officer. We built like Excel for big data. It was an awesome product. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I was like, oh, we built a product, but we haven't built a distribution channel. And like, what good is a product that nobody knows about? You need to have that distribution channel first, and then build the product that your audience wants, rather than building a product and then trying to find an audience for it. So I think that's like the value in building up.
So you're the distribution channel.
Is like, yes, I'm like, I'm building a distribution channel for something that I don't yet know what it's going to be. But like, my background is like, I kind of talked about Tableau, but then, I've spent the last 5 years in product management and building products. And I've realized that if you want to do anything useful in product, you need to know how to build distribution channels as well. So it's actually, being a content person is the new, like, being somebody who builds and distributes content is the new way to like found companies, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could keep it vague. Like, what's interesting is like the How to Get an Analytics Job title of this podcast is such a wide umbrella, because we could talk about resumes, we could talk about LinkedIn, we could talk about interviewing, and we could talk about getting the job. We could talk about network. Like, there's so many topics because what's coming to mind, and you can completely throw this in the trash if you want, but like, what if you called it like data culture or something like that?
Called what? Data culture?
Like the podcast, the theoretical podcast.
The theoretical podcast that you're convincing me to start.
Yes.
If I do, you'll be my first guest.
Yeah.
I mean
that is an interesting thought though, of the future is, because I was thinking about this as it relates to AI, and it's like AI is going to affect white collar jobs more so than blue collar jobs. Like, what is going to keep me buoyant in my career moving forward? And I think it's the relationships.
Totally. it's the network, and like, because also AI is one of the things that is making getting a job the traditional way so hard, because now everybody has these tools to help tweak the resume.
Right.
And it's like, there's this million software companies out there telling you, buy this product that's going to like help you tweak your resume so that you can stand out. And it's like, yeah, but everybody else is doing that. And so just moves the baseline. It's like the baseline is now you have to use the AI tool. But
right.
it's not helping you stand out. It's helping you not get left behind.
Right.
And so actually, if you want to stand out, you have to like move around the process and figure out like, how do I get a job without submitting a CV?
Okay, well, this is a perfect segue into the next topic I wanted to ask you about, which is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that?
Yeah, what's
seems like a dumpster fire.
Pardon me?
So LinkedIn seems like a dumpster fire right now.
I don't see the dumpster fire because I've like highly curated my feed.
Yeah.
I only like really high quality content, so my feed is like super high quality. And so
Gotcha.
the dumpster fire isn't so visible to me.
Yeah, it's more so like I see a lot of like really low IQ posts from people that are like
like the big mega influencers. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I have mixed feelings because some of them have been on the podcast, and it's like I don't want to disparage them because like what seems to happen is that it's almost like a playbook in that they create a following while they're getting their job, then they get their job and they get more of a following, and then they quit their job and become an influencer.
And then they tell everyone you should become an influencer. I think the influencers that you should ignore are the ones that are like they don't have anything to talk about except being an influencer.
Yeah, it's like circular logic. It's like
it is circular logic. Yeah. It's like I know you don't actually want your 100,000 followers to become an influencer because then they'll drown you out.
Right.
Like I like following people who are influencers because they have something to say, like Leah Tarrin and like product-led growth, or like Anthony Pieri and like product marketing, or like they're influencers with content and an opinion about something.
Well, yeah. So can I ask, I mean, and you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but how much engagement are they getting on average, would you say?
The people that I've just mentioned?
Yeah, like because what I've noticed is that it seems like the people who so are you familiar with Solomon Khan?
Yeah.
So I just joined his mentorship program. And what's crazy is that
I signed up as well.
Oh, we're going to be in it together. Nice.
I think so.
That's so funny. Well,
he's one of the most high quality people I think. Like,
yeah, and it's funny because I have double the amount of followers than he does.
Yeah,
and I have no business. Why would you listen to me? He was like the VP of Nielsen, and he's got this like pedigree, and like he's also super humble and nice. Like, it's a part of this. I'm published on LinkedIn, so I have like probably 15 to 20,000 people take my courses a month. So like, that leads to them just like following me to learn more about tools and analytics and stuff like that. But so there's like kind of a structural thing in my favor. But like I think that like most people getting a job don't even know what to look for.
Right.
Because like they don't it's too sophisticated to resonate with them, because like what I'm seeing is like, here are the top 3 things that you should do to get a job. That's going to get 500 engagements versus like a very nuanced story from Solomon about how he blew up his first internship and it led to a leadership position.
It's like
that's getting 100 engagements. And it's funny because it's like, I don't know. I mean, is that going to level out in time? Like because they like stay in that lane of like entry level people. But it's like every year or day that goes by, they're getting more and more irrelevant because they aren't close to that process.
They aren't close to that process. Totally.
Right.
They'll get replaced by somebody else who has the same playbook.
Yeah. And then
I love that we're having this conversation because I have wondered before, like, why does Solomon Khan not have like 50,000 followers? I find him so interesting. Like everything he puts out is like super high quality.
It's funny because like the conversation that I had with Gary, the fractional CEO, like that internet sensation playbook is going to go after the Solomons of the world. Like we're potentially going to monetize that because like I have a student, I think he was actually in the last podcast episode who I think it's funny because I think he's the smartest student I've had so far. And he's smarter than I am, but he's like young and, just not, I don't want to say naive. He's a little unpolished. He's a senior in college now, and he studied the Instagram algorithm to build up like a meme account.
Okay.
So he has an interest in that. And what I just pitched him on is like I'm just leaving sponsorship money on the table for the podcast. And it's funny because like those of you who are listening to this, I'm sorry if we're going to start incorporating ads, but the caveat being we can study our monetization through that, and we can pull it on the podcast and say, hey, here's like what Craig has told me is that you need to have like a hashtag and you need to post consistently on that topic on a day. So like I think I want to branch out into talking about mental health because there's a men's health mental health crisis for men that for whatever reason, I don't hear very much good advice about that. And there's not really like, there's no Mr. Rogers. There's no good role model, I feel like, for men anymore. So like, maybe that's a little presumptuous and like, I'm delusional and like, maybe I could be that role model. Maybe not for everybody, but for people in the analytics space. But like hashtag mental health Monday and having that over and over again, the algorithm on LinkedIn is going to recognize that. Yeah. And it's going to, if I keep it in that series and let's say I do it for 6 months on Mondays, I have a post about that. It's going to probably get some decent. And then the theory is that it's going to exponentially get more traction. And then people will go back and then they'll be promoted the other hashtags. Because it's like, you got to think about the game that's being played. LinkedIn's intention is to get eyeballs on the site. And if I'm creating, like Craig was saying that there's a tier of users on there that are like Elon Musk on Twitter. Of course, he's going to elevate his own posts, but it's also in the best interest of the company to elevate certain people because they get traction in the algorithm. They built an audience, so it's almost like a wheel effect. Right. It's funny because I feel like we're going a little bit down a rabbit hole about LinkedIn because I'm not sure. It is funny because in my career services program, I turned like 2 or 3 of my students into influencers. And it's funny because I think some of them are actually getting sponsorship deals now and on top of working an analytics job.
It's amazing.
But it's funny because it's all play. And I think understanding how the algorithm works is, how to get an analytics job. Analytics is a part of business. So it's like within kind of the pale of what I want to talk about on this podcast. But really, realistically, the people listening to this they don't need to become influencers. They just need to optimize their LinkedIn. So they need to get the right keywords. They need to get a project on there. Preferably like what we did is Craig came on the podcast last week and he's interested in potentially getting into the banking sector. So one of the VPs at Citibank has been following me for years. And I was like, I got a student that wants to get into the banking sector. Do you want to come in? You guys can network for a little bit. We can do an interview question, give him feedback from your perspective on that. And then also a portfolio review. We recorded that portfolio review and he put it in his project section within his LinkedIn profile. So actually, let me pull that up.
That's brilliant.
Right? Yeah. And it's funny because I don't know.
I think another thing that's really good for getting a job is putting out tutorials on like when you learn something, just make a recording of it and throw it out in a post.
Right.
Like that goes a long way. It starts building your brand as like an expert, or like at least a person who can learn and teach others?
Well, because what's funny is that, I mean, what's the basic like hiring process for most companies? It's 3 phases, right? It's phone screening, behavioral, technical interview. If you have a video of you explaining a project, that is functionally speaking the same as a phone screening.
Totally.
But yeah, so I actually just took this picture of Craig yesterday. I got my lights in there. I think he looks sharp. But if you come down, you can see he's added marketing analyst, project manager for my company.
Nice.
He had an internship with this construction company. And then under his, where is it? So projects, I guess he hasn't uploaded the video of him presenting his project to the VP, but this is what we worked in class last semester.
Okay.
Actually, no, this is from 2 semesters ago. This is from last semester. So, I mean, think about all the experience he has, and he's currently a junior. He's about to be a senior in like 15 days when the semester starts.
Amazing.
So yeah, so like what we did in my capstone course is I connected with the executive director of this. It's called Cancer Culture, and they like raise awareness for I think it's breast cancer mainly. Yeah. But we did a whole social listening project, and it's like he's got multiple stories he can pull out of that.
Yeah. But I think to this point on the hiring process, so I get a lot of people reaching out to me being like, hey, do you know like an entry-level analyst to work on like our data quality processes or something like that? I had like a chief product officer reach out to me last week asking that question. And I think this is the way that job searches are going to go, is like there's going to be like this CV, like apply online with your resume process that continues for a while, but like nobody's actually using it. It's just like candidates like automating the submission of their CV to like 100 companies, and then the hiring managers get so many that they're just like, I don't even want to read these. I'm going to just go ping somebody that I know who has a big network of analysts and ask them to like make me a recommendation. And then they're going to go with that instead of like any of the stuff that came inbound. So like, that's why I say like, yeah, like your resume is important, but like instead of optimizing your resume, like optimize for like not needing it. Yeah. And like you can do that by just becoming somebody that puts out educational content online, and then you get known, and then you're top of mind. And I think there's something to the cadence of it as well, because it's like people's memories are very short. So like you might be the most awesome like analyst, but like if you haven't been in my feed for like 3 months, like you're just not top of mind. Right. So just posting something regularly so that you're like always top of mind, then like somebody's going to get an email from a hiring manager saying, do you know anyone? Then they can say, oh yeah, like there's this guy that keeps showing up in my feed, or this girl, or, whatever. That's the way I would go about it, is like make yourself top of mind as an expert in something.
Yeah. Well, it's, are you familiar with the concept or the term vector force?
I am not, but you have used it in our pre-call.
Okay. It's funny. You should pause me. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're speaking gibberish, which like, I realize I'm a very online person. Kind of like JD Vance. I think that's what the criticism he's getting right now. So Kevin Kelly is like an early internet evangelist, and he wrote a blog like in early internet days called 1,000 True Fans. Right. And he was talking about like, if you can get 1,000 people who give you $100, right, then like that's $100,000 right there. You can live off of that. But he was also talking about, I think in that article, maybe it was in an interview that I heard with him, about like a vector force. I have positioned myself as a vector force. So I have a ton of people who want analytics jobs, and then I also know a lot of people who need analytics.
You're a marketplace.
Essentially, yeah. It's weird because it sounds a little bit grandiose, to say that, but it's like, it's true though. And
Yeah,
there's
like
money,
that. You are a marketplace.
yeah, and there's money there. I mean, I feel weird. I think I should be a little bit more transparent about money, but I've probably made about $350,000 through LinkedIn over the years, through the courses,
Amazing.
through selling my own stuff through it. And yeah, it's like I see the economic value of it, and I made the active decision to stop selling it because I feel like it cheapened myself in some way. You know, I like that social. It's like do you want to cash out now? Because like if a company reached out to me and said, all right, I'll do this for $5,000, I'll find you a student and I'll vet them, or I can just, connect them, and then I've got a stronger
You've
relationship
got like
with the student.
social capital that you're banking.
Yeah. So it's like a trade-off of like, do I want to optimize for now, or do I want to try to build, because it's weird working a full-time job now. And I will say this, a good corporate culture is that I feel like I'm back in college.
Right.
And that was like a complete paradigm shift of mine. Cause like for years I told myself I'm unemployable, I'm professionally feral. Like I'm not going to be able to work a full-time job. And it's weird. I'm like, I enjoy this. And I hate that about myself on some level, but it's like, no, I just need to update that script or that narrative in my mind about, well, I'm extremely financially stable. Like I'm living off of about 50% of what I bring home each month. And it's like, one way to frame that up is like every month I work, I buy myself an extra month of runway if I wanted to pull the plug and go and launch another business, which is so much more responsible than like I had no business starting a consulting agency back in 2017. I turned my last internship into my first consulting client. And I would just like, I will say this, I'm realizing there's a lot of skills that I didn't even realize I had, because like I got real used to ambiguity. Like I would pitch clients and know about 80% of what I was talking about, and I had to go and fill in the other 20%. And I had to do that over and over and over again. And if I didn't do it, I didn't get paid. I didn't,
You can't know everything up front. Like
no. And it's like, there's like almost like a political skill of like how to handle that. Because you don't want to say that you don't know it, but you also don't want to say that you do know it. So it's like, oh, I can look into that, or like, like it's.
I'll figure it out. Like this is actually the master skill of my boss. Is like he has like utmost confidence in his ability to figure stuff out, and so he sells stuff all the time that he like. We don't know how to deliver, but like, I shouldn't say this online. But like 100% of the time, he's like knows how to figure it out, and it's just like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
that
like
confidence comes through that like this is a problem I can solve. Yes, like.
Well, I mean, let's think through what's the upside and the downside of that.
Yeah, I mean the downside to that is that you get stuck with a project that you can't deliver on. The upside is that you get a lot more business than, I think the key is you have to have the capability, like, because there's a lot of idiots that have like utmost confidence but don't have the capability to back it up. The reason I work for this guy is because he has the capability to back it up. He's like one of the best technical people I've ever met in my life.
Oh, that's cool. See, it's funny because I'm not a very technical person. I actually outsource most of my like coding work, or at least I have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like I can go and find somebody who can figure it out for me and pay me.
Yeah. Because you're a marketplace.
So, yeah, I guess that's true. That is an interesting way of thinking about it.
You connect demand and supply.
Yeah, I mean, I've hired a few people through Upwork just to work on consulting engagements, but like now it's like, I got a friend that's getting a PhD in machine learning at Georgia Tech for finance. And it's like, I can just go tap him and say, hey, can you do this for me? If he's got time for it. Yeah. I mean, he's way more sophisticated with like just the technical side. It actually makes me think of this story. So when I was in Playa del Carmen last year, I was at a coffee shop and this guy came up to me and was like, hey, I took your course. And it turns out that he was a guy that was working as a consultant for Formula One, building out like, he built out an interface that like, how they talk through their like walkie-talkies or whatever. It's not a walkie-talkie, it's a headset.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not like 5-year-old children being like, hey. So he built out a system that took all of that speech and turned it into text, and it was streaming down so that people could like make sense of what was going on in real time. But that's crazy because it's like there are people out there. Once you start getting more traction, like I'm sure that there's more people in my network that could solve problems for me that I don't even know about right now.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a benefit to building out, I guess, a following. I don't know.
If you want to be a marketplace, having a following is like, that is the best way to build a marketplace.
Yeah. Well, because a part of me is like, am I just doing this for my own ego? Because it's like I'm internet famous. It's so funny when I meet people and they're intimidated by me because they're like, "Wow, I don't know."
Followers.
What?
You have a lot of followers.
Yeah, I need more though. I'm working on it. So if you're interested, I'm open to like doing writing sessions with you. If you wanted to like sit down and be like, what is your core thing? Break it down into like 5 to 7 subtopics, and then that's your cadence.
There is no science behind anything that I do.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I can tell you've got a bright mind and you're like on it because of the posts. Because you said it's all stream of consciousness for you.
It is. I literally just like I have a thought and I'm like, I'll share that. There is no science behind. Like I've got 17,000 followers through like zero science.
Well, I mean that is a sign, I think, that like where could it be if you actually like took
if I actually applied science to it. Yes.
Yeah. Or it's not even science, like it's just the systems thinking approach to it.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's almost like therapy in a way. It's like if you put a structure behind it, like you can take the themes that you're like kind of working on in your brain and then put them down on paper. It's almost like a form of journaling in a way.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But on that note, are you ready? Do you have any other thoughts on LinkedIn, or do you want to dive into the topic of mental health?
Let's dive into the topic of mental health.
All right, because this is how we connected, right? Because it
is. Yeah,
because I think you posted about bipolar.
I did, yes, because I have bipolar. So I was diagnosed in 2020, about 4 years ago, and it was like totally. It was a very work-related incident as well. Like the way that I actually originally thought I had like ADHD, and my husband's a doctor, and I was like running in circles and just telling him like, I have like sudden onset ADHD. I don't know what's going on. I can't read a paragraph. Like I literally lost the ability to read, and I was running like I had like this insane amount of like unbounded energy, and was just transporting my body like 30 kilometers a day, like on foot.
Mania.
and couldn't concentrate on anything. And 2 days later, I ended up sending this insane email to Adam Selipsky. If anybody knows him, he's the guy who was the most recent CEO of AWS. He's like one of the most powerful men in business. He was my CEO at that time at Tableau. And so I sent him this like crazy email where I was like, it was the middle of the US presidential election. And I was like, hey, there's this guy in our German team, Timo, and we need to make him American so that he can run for president. And so I sent this email to literally one of the most powerful men in business saying, we need to make my colleague American so he can run against Trump.
That's amazing. What, did you respond?
No, I responded about 16 times because I then had like racing thoughts. Yeah. And I then replied to myself and CC'd a whole bunch more people. By the time this email thread was done, I had CC'd like a bunch of people in the leadership team. I added my partner, my old roommate, some friends, a random neuroscientist who like was quoted in a book I was reading. Like it was just the most random collection of people, and there was about 16 threads of me replying to myself. And the HR
Wow.
team ended up being like, okay, nobody's allowed to talk about this. This is a mental health crisis. And then my husband, basically tricked me into going to the hospital. He was like, forget what I said 2 days ago. Like, we're just gonna like take this precautionary measure. And I don't know. He somehow tricked me to going into the hospital, and I ended up being like an inmate for a month, like in a lockup unit. They were like, you are severely manic. And what was crazy was there were people who came in with like schizophrenia, suicide attempts, like really severe conditions, sometimes both. And they were like admitted and discharged in like less time than I was. I was still there dancing. Like I just danced for a month around a psych ward like a crazy person.
So yeah, because this happened in England, so I imagine it's different because like the whole history of mental health in this country is fast. Like in America is interesting because there was an experiment, I think in the 70s, where they admitted grad students into a psych ward and then they couldn't get out. So that like caused like a massive shift. And because what's unfortunate is a lot of the homeless population they're just mentally ill and there's just no place for them in our society, which it's weird.
I met them. I hung out with them. They were, because I was in a public hospital. So
yeah,
I was with a lot of homeless people for that month. And I think, one of the most humbling moments of my life was like, I at the time, I didn't think anything of it, but I think back to it now. And like, if I feel my head getting big, I remember this moment, and it brings me back down to earth. But there was this woman, Tina, and I think she'd smoked for 69 out of her 70 years on earth. And she was like just laying on the couch and just very, very overweight. And she says to me, like, as I'm dancing around, and she's like, haven't you got any other moves?
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm like, I am being insulted, but yeah, like, no, I don't have any other
moves. Well, yeah, I mean, that's got to be such a surreal experience of like losing agency. Like,
yeah, but the thing is, you lose agency, but you like don't have insight into the fact that you've lost agency. And so the feeling of mania is actually very similar to being on like a drug trip.
Right. So I was talking about being institutionalized.
Oh, yeah.
Like you were aware of that, right?
I was, but like I just made up a story about how I was like, yeah, I'm here because I'm an undercover agent, like, and I'm like doing this research into the state of the mental health like system, and then I'm gonna go and like publish it in the BBC. Like I had a great time when I was there because I fabricated so many stories in my mind about why I was there and why it was like the right place for me to be at that time. Like it was horrible for my family. It was horrible for my friends. They were all very concerned, but I had like no concern. When you lose your mind, you're like not worried.
Well, what's interesting is in a way, this might sound off, but let me finish the thought. You're kind of lucky that it's not functional for you because like, for example, Kanye West, a lot of his musical insights come from the mania. And he's like built. So like, because I saw him on Joe Rogan and he was talking about how I don't want to get on this medication because then I lose my muse.
Oh, totally.
Because I think there's a fascinating connection between creativity and mental illness.
Oh,
like there's something there.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I was like in the lead up to because it's a curve. It's kind of a inverted U-shaped curve where like when you're on the way up,
it's amazing, right?
Really creative and just I think part of it is like mania, hypomania, let's call it, is a feeling of great disinhibition. And when you lose your inhibition, it allows you to be a lot more creative. Because if you think about like what stops people from being creative, it's like they shoot down their own ideas before they've had a chance to formulate.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're in this state of like extreme disinhibition, you stop shooting down your ideas, and so they just like flow freely, and you have more of them. But then it reaches a point where you've like lost your mind, and then you are going the other way down the curve. And I had hit that other end. But in the lead up to this period, I was writing like 16 pages a day, like of just prose for like. So yeah.
That's so. Do you have bipolar 1 then?
It's I don't know, because in the UK we don't have that distinction.
Okay.
It's just you just have bipolar or you don't. But I have the kind where I have like severe mania, so I think that's bipolar 1.
But yeah, bipolar 1 is more on the mania side. Bipolar 2 is more on the depression side.
Yeah, then I would have bipolar 1. Yeah.
Because like I think I've talked about this in a LinkedIn post. I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast yet, but I'm coming out of the most severe depression that I've had in my entire life. And it's weird because on all appearances, I would have made it. Like I was living in Mexico off my passive revenue stream I had a Airbnb that I rented for, 3 months that was 2 blocks from the beach, rooftop pool, like amazing food. The thing about Playa del Carmen is that it's a digital nomad hub. So like I got plugged into that social scene immediately. There were other people looking to meet people like me. So I felt like almost like I was like back in undergrad or college again, where it's like social and fun and people were available, to where like, as you get older, people become less and less. Like I was joking with Gary when I saw him yesterday I'm like jealous of my friend Ryan's baby, because he's the baby. She stole my friend away from me. Like I don't see him anymore, I mean, but it's like you grow up and you have less free time. But what's weird is that, while that was happening, I was losing traction on my business. Because part of how I was growing that business was like organic in-person networking. But to be quite honest, though, I was like just burnt out on consulting. I just didn't want to do that anymore. So like I tried to pivot into data literacy training. That got no traction on it. I mean, I got a few. I had people reaching out to me to like hire me as a contractor to come train their company, but that didn't really pan out. And it was like, I don't know. I didn't really want to be a contractor. I wanted to be more of like a business owner and provide a service offering. So around March, I decided to shut down the business, and then I enrolled in a 6-week outpatient dialectical behavioral therapy, like in a group setting. And it was interesting because I saw people who were severely mentally ill and chronically so. Like it was so hard. I felt like I had severe agitation. I felt like I was jumping out of my skin, because like for 8 hours or 6 hours a day, you sit down and talk about your issues. And like for me, it was like the failure and loss of identity of being an entrepreneur, and it was weird. And like what I kind of landed on was like this idea of like surrender. Like it's like you let go of, because a lot of that was just like ego driven. But like once you let go, and there's this concept called radical acceptance of like, you just have to accept what's going on right now. And, I live a lot of my like time in my mind thinking about what could be in the future. And I think that's good, but I think you need to have a good ratio of like what is actually happening now. Yeah. To where like, I'm starting an agency when I was like 26 years old and had no experience or skills. Is like not what I would tell my students to go do. Like you should probably go work for a while, learn the business, and then start it. But, I'm more like it's interesting because most of the friends that I attract seem to be on the opposite end of the spectrum of like, they wish they had, more confidence. Like I kind of tread the line of like delusions of grandeur, or like being like too into myself. And I mean, part of that probably stems back from like I was the firstborn male in my family. I was adored, and like all of that. But the getting back to the dialectical behavior therapy, like that really, it sucked, and I felt like I wanted to quit every day for the first 2 weeks. But then it was like weird because I started to kind of crave it. Like you would sit down, the way they'd structure the day, you check in, they have like it's almost like what you see in the movies where it's like a circle and you sit down and you talk through your day. And then it's like, you'd have to ask permission, like, hey, can I give you a compliment or can I give you feedback on that? And it's almost like it's so antithetical to American culture because it's group based. So where like, almost all my friends are entrepreneurs and we're all in our own lane. And I've kind of realized like how lonely I've been because I've just been like doing my own thing. I have friends and I see them, but like it's weird that working in a corporation that has a good culture, I almost feel like I'm part of a tribe and I get to see the same people. And it's very therapeutic for me, which is so weird. Like if we could go back 4 months, I would be like, that is a crazy thought. But it's true though. Like it really going through that and like really like breaking down all of these assumptions I had has been really, really valuable for me. And I feel like I'm switched from much more of a scarcity mindset to much more of a abundance mindset and but I mean, that was my job for 6 weeks I need to get my mental health sorted out. I'm also sleeping.
Yeah, and it's one of the hardest things that you can ever do in life.
But I mean, what an investment though, right?
It is. It's a very good investment. Yeah.
So,
good
yeah.
For you.
But yeah, I mean, I'm hesitant to like post more about it because you're right. It, like in one of the posts that I saw, like there's a stigma around it. And I think that's totally bullshit. And, kind of getting back to that frame of scarcity versus abundance, like if like I went through this experience and if I could talk about it, it actually might, instead of be a hindrance to me, it might actually endear me or like, help other people and help like kind of grow that like marketplace idea that you keep kind of harping back to.
Yeah. So I'm very public about like my condition. And I've actually never felt stigma or judgment. And it might just be because I have too many delusions of grandeur to like
we're
pick up on the stigma. But the general sentiment that I've got from people is like one of acceptance and like gratitude because it helps them understand something that they maybe have friends and family have experienced. And so it gives them like a window of insight into their friends or family. Like other people with the condition often reach out to me and are like, oh, I feel so understood now. Like, let's have a conversation. Right. So I've found only positive things come from it. And like, my like boss at my last 2 companies, like my employers were both very grateful that I was transparent about it. It just, I don't know. It's just easier when people understand what's going on. So, I think everybody's going to have a different experience.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, it also shows that you're proactive about kind of taking care of yourself, which I think is really valuable.
I try to be.
Yeah. Gotcha. Sorry, I had to go and find my charger. I'm so glad. So those of you who are going to be listening to this, I'm at my parents' house dog sitting. So luckily the dogs haven't been acting up, which is nice. So cool. But yeah, I also like one thing we kind of talked about in like the pre-interview chat was I think there's like systemic bias against men within therapy because one-on-one therapy doesn't really work for me. And I feel like most men are probably better off joining like a jiu-jitsu gym where they get to do something physical. I think that they're doing this in Nordic countries where like they have a village and then they just have a shed with work tools, and men will work on something together, and that's how they bond.
Right.
Like women will talk and look at each other. Men
Yeah.
are usually on the same side of the table looking at something, which I think
Yeah.
is like it's a very nuanced thing, but I think it does really matter.
That's really interesting.
Well, because I was actually having this conversation with my girlfriend last night. I think the education system, at least in the United States, I don't know about in the UK, is biased towards women as well.
It has become in recent years.
Yeah. Well, number one, it's like openly hostile towards men. I remember my freshman orientation, they said, if you're drunk and she's drunk and you guys have sex, you're a rapist, which feels like really gross. Because it's like, wait, it's like, number one, I think a lot of men feel like a predator until they're proven to be one of the good ones. And then also, too, that takes agency away from women. It's like, well, okay, so she can't consent when she's drunk. Can she consent to drive? Like, what if she like got in a car, killed a family of 4? That also feels like oddly underhanded, subversively patronizing towards women as well.
Mm.
But I mean, I get, I don't. I'm hesitant to jump on these like hot button issues because like I know there's a lot of trauma around these kind of issues, and I don't want to like touch on that and then them like kind of like attack me because like I'm part of. They see me as kind of like part of the problem. It's because like I'm not a political commentator, but I think it's an interesting like microcosm to like flush out an idea even more.
Yeah, for sure.
Because narratives are powerful, and like we all interact with them all the time, both externally and internally. And like being a little bit more, I don't even know how to phrase that up, a little bit more intentional maybe, or like active and like thinking about the narratives that are surrounding you, I think is really important.
I agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. All right. So AI.
Let's
Are you
get
using it at all?
I use it every day. I couldn't
really
do
okay
my job without it. Yeah, totally.
Tell me
So
more.
I use it for coding.
Okay.
I have a really like opposite opinion to the vast majority of the world when it comes to AI. Everyone's like, oh, it's going to replace engineers. And I'm like, I'm going to become an engineer. That's maybe like, maybe I'm the person that's going to replace the engineers, but for like the time being until AI replaces me. But I viewed it as an opportunity to improve my technical skills. Like my background is like math, and so like algorithms come really naturally to me. But I've always been like it's been at an arm's distance for me to be able to implement those algorithms. Whereas now I can actually implement my own math, and so like that's a huge superpower. So I'm working for a client right now. It's a hedge fund, and they have this problem where their trading system doesn't expose the links between the buy and sell side trades. Without those links, you can't calculate stuff like profit and loss because profit and loss is calculated across the trade pair. And so we have to go through the data and like work out what the links are based on patterns in the data. And it's like a super complicated math problem because it's like if you incorrectly match a pair, then like you lose that pair to match with the next correct pair, blah, blah, blah. So you have to get a really high match rate. Otherwise, like, yeah, if you make a mistake, the cascading effect is massive.
It's like millions of dollars.
Yeah. So I've been working on like building this trade matching algorithm for them. It's something that they've wanted to do for like 5 years, but just the engineers that they hired were like never able to do it because it's a math problem. And so it's like, well, if you hire a math person and give them like the ability to code, that's a much more tractable approach to the problem. So when I joined my current firm, I couldn't write a line of code. I couldn't read a line of code. I was like totally code illiterate. And they gave me this code base and they're like, here's like what we've got so far, like make it work. And I was like, okay. You're charging how much to the client for my time? Good God. Pressure's on. So I just like threw the code base into ChatGPT and was like, tell me what this thing does. And then it breaks it down and explains it to me. And from there, I was able to like learn how to read code. And then once you can read code, then you can be literate in like when you ask it to write your own code, you can debug it. And that I find is the most important thing with AI is like, it's never going to get the right answer. So you need to be able to pinpoint where the error is. And so you have to have some level of code literacy to be able to say like, you made this error in this for loop or whatever. Do this other thing instead. And so like, I think I have a really good understanding of the logic of programming. But I'm like totally shit at like knowing the right syntax or like what function can I use with what data structure and that kind of stuff. Well, so AI really helps me with that.
I too am code illiterate, and you know whose fault it is? It's Tableau's.
Oh, that was like literally what we set out as like a mission was like, let's enable people who know code to be able to do really powerful things with data.
Well, because like I could, if I were being a little bit nefarious, I could say, oh yeah, I have 8 years of working with SQL, and it's like, yeah, kind of, because isn't Tableau built on a NoSQL framework?
It's built on a SQL framework.
So it's like
Tableau generates SQL behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah. So it's like I can come in. I guess I shouldn't say I'm code illiterate because like I can do like a if then statement or something like that. But it's like basically Tableau has been telling me like here's the right framework for that.
Right.
But one thing that I have been, so I just, in my current role, I just got access to the SQL or the Snowflake database. Alteryx. So like, I think I want to start getting into actually building out my own SQL queries because that's one of the biggest holes that I have, I think, as a educator in the analytics space is that I don't know SQL. So like, I recently like I just watched a YouTube video and like built out a very basic SQL database and like did some basic joins. So I understand the high level framework of like, this is how data works. This is, these are all the different use cases. I just don't have like, I think what it is I've seen SQL in the wild and some of them have like 38 lines. And I'm like, this looks like, this is like the code to like launch a rocket to me. It seems so complex. And what I'm realizing now as I'm saying this, it's like, oh, this is probably just someone who isn't thinking very efficiently. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's like usually if you're really good at coding, you can be really concise.
Right. Yeah, because it's almost like a glimpse into someone else's mind and how it works. And I don't want to be in that person's mind. It's like when I shared my screen and you saw that I had 38 tabs running on my Chrome browser. It's kind of like that, where it's like all these like different threads, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to close this time. I might come back to it. So, yeah, it's ChatGPT is definitely a game changer because when I reached out to my friend, who's Michael Galornik, he was saying that I could learn Python like super quickly using ChatGPT. Like I need a use case, and then I need to tell ChatGPT, hey, here's the use case, here's how the data is structured. How would you approach it? And then it'll basically like write it out for me, and then I can study the syntax and like just kind of build out from there. It's interesting because the state of education is rapidly shifting. And I think some educators are trying to fight against ChatGPT, and they're not going to win.
They're not going to win. Nope.
And also if you are a professor that is threatened by ChatGPT, you're probably a bad professor.
Right.
Because it's like
it's another learning
rote memorization in the age of AI is just useless.
There's no value. Yeah.
Right. And but what's kind of tricky on the flip side of that is like, how do you actually teach critical thinking?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you developed the critical thinking muscle while you were in undergrad, grad school, or once you started?
I think I developed it when I started working.
Yeah.
I think I learned how to pass exams before then.
Right. See, that's not how I teach. I don't have a final in my class. Like I have them go out, find a data set. I mean, I have a ton of different data sets that like I can give them. And it's like, I want you to think about what you want by the time you graduate, and we're going to optimize your LinkedIn, your resume, and your portfolio to that. And your final exam is your portfolio, and then also how you present it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, which like it's weird.
That's such a more useful practical output than like,
yeah,
got 80% of this exam.
Right. Yeah. I was joking with Terrell Tyson, who's the last podcast guest, about like, well, I mean, what like we were going through. So Craig had pulled Kaggle, a Kaggle data source that looked at like lending trees, loan data, and then he did like a Power BI dashboard that like looked at the different types of loans, the seasonality, the topic, the size, and he had like actually created like a whole presentation to pitch him. And then he had like gotten done, and I was like, Terrell, do you think it might be more impressive if I gave him a test and he just got 100% on it? It's like, no, not at all. Because yeah, it's like, I don't know how education's going to work in the future.
I know.
Right. Because it feels like it's antiquated at this point.
Extremely antiquated.
Yeah. That's a good question.
I've got a 6-month-old baby in my belly, and I'm like,
yeah, you're probably thinking about that.
I'm like, I don't want to send her to school. Like that, what are they going to teach her? I don't know. Because like, even when I look at how I'm learning to code, I'm like, all of the code academies that teach you how to code are irrelevant. They come nowhere near like what I've just done with ChatGPT. Just like throwing a code base in it and being like, tell me what this does, and like learning iteratively from there. Because the way they teach coding is like from an atomic level up. So it's like, this is an array, this is a list, this is a whatever the different data structures are. And like, these are the functions that you can perform on a dictionary, and like, blah, blah, blah. You're like, you don't get to the like, and here's what you can do with it and why it matters until like, you're like a year into your comp sci degree, maybe not a year, but like it takes a long time to get to the why and the what. Whereas I started with like, here's a use case, and I'm like reverse engineering down to the atomic level where like, okay, now like 3 months in, I start to have a bit of an understanding of the difference between a list and a dictionary and an array and whatever. So yeah, it's like learning backwards from how things are traditionally taught.
Well, so from a educator or content creator standpoint, I get it. So I have certain courses on Udemy or LinkedIn that like during the pandemic, I created a 100-hour long course on Power BI, like for the certification.
Wow.
And what's funny is that by the time I had posted, they had done an update, so it was outdated.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I realized like, oh, I don't want to be in this arms race with the different tools of like having to go back and update everything. Like,
yeah.
The move seems to be to create evergreen content. So like my course on how data analytics for students, that's evergreen. Right. Marketing analytics, sales analytics, like that's like those are frameworks. Yeah. And I get that that's why they would want to approach it that way from like a efficiency standpoint, because there's no way in hell that colleges are going to be able
to keep up with
it. They're just not nimble enough. They're too big. And it's funny because I'm on the board at High Point University in Greensboro College, and it's part of the reason why I'm not teaching it at High Point right now is because it's a 30-minute drive, and it's like that's what if I'm teaching that's 3 hours of my week that I won't get back. So I don't want to do that. But also too, like I have much more influence on the school at Greensboro College than I do at High Point. So like, I get to control my own class. Like I just met with the VP of admissions, and he wants to like put me up on stage and we can film it. And it's like, that's great for my content and also like help me with my brand positioning.
Right.
Like I could have like a Jordan Peterson style talk where like I have a student and we can talk about like his success story of how he got in my class, and he worked with one of my clients, got his first like actual taste of real world analytics. He then brought that into his interview for an internship, just knocked it out of the park with the internship, got his first job. that whole narrative happened within the last year.
Right.
And it's like, those are the stories that are going to help the VP sell more,
Totally.
get more students in, because right now it's a crapshoot. Like, you're going to spend $100,000 and you might not get what you paid for, or like, I guess like, what do you even pay for? Because like, it's what's crazy is education's uniquely positioned in that students pay for it, but then they don't want to go to it. It's like, you're paying for this and you're not going to class. Like, what
is going on?
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't have the answer. I agree with the problem statement.
Well, I think the answer is like what I'm doing this upcoming semester. Here, I'll go ahead and pull my screen up again. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be live streaming my guest lectures on Thursday evenings.
Amazing.
And like the first guest lecture is going to be my intern who came into town last week, and number one, he's gonna give them a narrative arc of like, okay, I got a job in analytics within the past year. Here's my experience. Here's how I approached it, just so they have a mental model of how to go about doing that. But then also too, so he worked for me for 2 years, and now he's already gotten a promotion within the first year of working, which is awesome.
That's so good.
So the potential activity is going to be the roadmap, but then also too, he's using ChatGPT to automate a lot of his job. And it's like, I want a use case.
Yep.
Isn't that awesome?
That is awesome.
One ask I have with you,
how to use ChatGPT to learn Python. That's exactly what I'm doing. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. So this is Michael Galarnik right here, PhD candidate at Georgia Tech, finance. Yeah. Right there. And then I got Solomon coming on, Gary Fly, John's the analytics manager at Home Depot. Joey Cheek's an interesting one. So he's an Olympic gold medalist in speed skating, who's now the executive vice president of the Chamber of Commerce. And so I went through their incubator program. So I've got good connections with the Chamber of Commerce here in Greensboro.
Brilliant.
So I don't know. This feels like play to me.
Yeah.
Like I don't like this is technically work for me, I guess, because like there's money in the podcast, but this feels like loose and creative and fun, and like I'm open to your input. I'm not like, I feel like the last 8 years I've like white knuckled my life where I'm like, this has to work, and now I'm like,
let's
concept of surrender is like, I'm relaxed. I'm open to new ideas, have traction. I mean, a big part of that is the finances, though, because when I was making the most money, so in 2023 in the fall, I had like 3 months where I made 5 figures in revenue through the career services program on top of my other revenue stream.
Wow.
What's crazy about that is that I was so stressed. I was just like Uber Eats on top of, I was paying a personal chef to like cook my own meals and going out and doing this. And I probably spent like $7,000 in November. I'm spending like half of that now. So I've gotten my finances in order, because I also had $15,000 worth of credit card debt at that time.
Oh my God.
Because it was like, I had those 3 really high months, and then that competitor entered the market at a quarter of my price. And at that same time, I had hired 3 people to help me run the program. Sales went to 0. I lost $15,000. And I went alone.
Oh God.
Well, but I've got space from it now, and it's like, holy shit, I've got such a different perspective on work, because every day I work in the fresh market, there's a part of me that's like, oh, it's still here. Like, it's still here. I can still collect a paycheck. Like that's not a worry that I have. And just having that like base level of gratitude is such a different mindset. But also too, I think having founder's mentality as an employee is like such a different like vibe and energy.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So, okay. I feel like the audience may not know what I mean when I say founder's mentality. What can you explain, like how
Like
you
founder's
understand it?
mentality is like I feel like I have a founder's mentality because I came from like a pre-product market fit startup
Yeah.
where I like poured my heart into
Yeah.
building this product. And actually the hardest part of building the product was selling the product. Because like I really subscribe to the Rob Snyder view of the world that he's like a startup founder advisor on like go to market.
Wait, Rob Snyder? I thought he was an actor.
Rob, no, I think. Hold on, am I
Am I thinking of
saying
Rob Reiner?
Rob? No, it's. I'm gonna look him up now. Yeah, Rob Snyder.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a fellow at the Harvard Innovation Lab. Anyway, his whole thing is like, if you want to like basically throw out the textbook, if you want to build a business, the only thing you should do is try and sell your product. And like, if people are buying, you're not solving a problem that they care about. And so like do the sales part first and then build the product once you've like sold it.
Right.
As opposed to the reverse, which has historically been build the product and then sell it. Anyway, so that
what is that
was what I spent the whole time. I was like the CPO, but I was actually like the CRO because I was just like militantly working on sales because I'm like, if we can't sell the thing, there's no point building it. So yeah, what is founder's mentality? I don't know. It's like I've come into my next company with just an enormous amount of respect and gratitude for the fact that like my bosses are able to generate revenue. And it's, I think unfounder's mentality is like, I think you should pay me more because I'm worth this. Yeah. And it's like, I'm like, dude, I'm so glad that you're doing the selling and I'm not. Like, thank you for making a viable business where I can work on interesting things and like teach myself how to code in Python. Like,
right.
I don't know. Like, so it's having much more gratitude for like the struggle of like actually making money. Cause until you are responsible for earning revenue, you don't know shit. That's kind of fun. I don't know. It's like,
it is interesting because that's an angle I didn't even think about of the like, pay me more, you know, because I was talking about, are you familiar with Davis Clark?
No.
Oh, okay. He's like all over TikTok and he's so funny. And it's like Channel 5 did a little mini documentary on him. So he's a guy that's like, it's like a new shift in the culture where he's young. He's probably in his mid-20s and he's like, I'm stoked. He's like, I woke up. It's the riser routine. I woke up at 4:30 this morning. I hit the gym. I got a nice pump in. I'm now on the subway. I'm here with my boys, and we're getting hyped because we're going to go in there and we're going to bring home the shareholder value. And it's like, and he's making TikToks about that. And at first, I thought it was a meme. I thought he was making fun of corporate culture, and it's like, no, he's 100% genuine.
Oh, wow!
And he has like 60 million followers. So it's like a cultural shift that's going on from, you know, us millennials and like the gig economy and being like, you know, self-sufficient and entrepreneurial to where it's like, no, we're going to be in this big company and, you know, we're going to be, you know, locked. It's basically like a frat bro. And I was talking about it with Gary yesterday, and we were talking about like, who would you rather hire? Like the golden retriever energy person or like the angry black cat person? You know, it's true, right?
Yeah.
You know, like the Marxist communist mentality of like, we need to seize the means of labor. That is the antithetical of the founder's mentality. It's an interesting conversation. I haven't had this specific conversation before, I don't think, but I'm starting to kind of piece it together of, you know, like, and it's also a broader trend that's happening with Gen Z where there's a void between the men and the women, and that the men are becoming increasingly conservative and the women are becoming increasingly liberal. And I don't know what that's going to look like.
I actually saw an Economist article about exactly that.
Well, I mean, it's like
it's like,
well, it's like, are we going to have just like a population collapse? I don't know.
Right.
But also too, I've seen this with one of my friends, Ryan, he's doing very, very well. He's got his marketing agency just got like major traction. Like they landed a deal, and I think they're doing well into the millions of revenue at this point. I introduced him to my friend Kelly, who's was very liberal and outspoken, but then they got together, and all of a sudden now she's like, well, maybe we should lower taxes. It's interesting.
Very funny.
Just now that she's wifed up by a wealthy guy, it's there's some I don't know. I was afraid to become a professor at first because it was right around the time where all the madness was going on campus. And what's interesting at Greensboro College, most of my kids are pretty normal. There's not extremist students that are in my classroom. So I'm pretty grateful for that. And I don't know, because I went to UNCG, University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and that campus seems split. On one side, it's all the artistic people, and they're, kind of in that leftist, far leftist. And then there's the frat bros who go to the sports bar and watch sports and drink beer and play pool. And it's weird because it's it's separate cultures within one culture. Right. I don't know. I mean, well, so you're in London. I don't know if does any of this resonate with you?
It's I hear about it, but it's not my reality.
Okay. Well, yeah. What's Gen Z in England like?
I think I realized how old I am and disconnected from Gen Z when I went out for dinner last week with a bunch of the European team at Sigma Computing. I don't know if they're an emerging analytics company that's going to replace Tableau.
Oh, God. I'm starting to work Gen Z slang in. Facts?
Oh yeah.
On God.
I don't even know. I don't even know the Gen Z slang. I just learned yesterday that high socks are back in. I am so behind.
Yeah, high socks with sandals. I was thinking about using AI to create young Gen Z men are getting perms now, and I was thinking about doing it an AI picture with me a perm.
Right. Yeah. But no, I'm I need to get back in with Gen Z because I feel I'm becoming disconnected from where the kids are at.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught.
So I went and hung out with all these people from Sigma, and I asked them, I was like, "You guys are all Gen Z, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they asked me, "You're a millennial, right?" And I was like, "What else would I be?" And they were like, "I don't know, the one above." I was like, that's people in their 40s.
Like Gen X.
I'm pregnant.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was oh, how humbling.
It's fascinating. I have no idea where all this is going. Although I kind of, to piggyback off some Gen Z slang, do it for the plot. That's a big one. I'm kind of here for it all. It's such an interesting time to be alive.
It is.
Think about what happened politically. Joe Biden was in the debate, was incoherent. Then Donald Trump got shot. Then Kamala came at if I saw a post on social media that was if someone wrote this in a TV show, you'd be like, this isn't real.
I mean, the only thing that could make it better is if we took my German colleague and made him American so he could run in the presidential election.
That's true. Yeah. We need
the only plot twist we need.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Bethany, I feel like we how long have we been talking?
It's an hour and a half. It's over an hour and a half now.
So I'm gonna end the episode. But I'm down to chat a little bit more, so we can drop names and say things that I don't want to broadcast out there. But thank you so much for being on. This has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed your company.
I've really enjoyed this conversation as well. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show.
Yeah.